What's up? What's up? What's up? How's it going? Pastor B here. Hope everybody's well. Who's on? Who's on now? It's what time is it? It's 8:06. It's 8:06. Comment. Let me know you're here. Thanks for joining. Hey guys, what's up? It's Pastor B. Hope everyone is doing well. Is everybody glued to the TV, waiting for these results, presidential election results? How's everybody doing? If you could join me in this discussion, it would be great. If you can't, you can watch the replay. But just wanted to share, on Thursday evenings, we usually have a life group, a group called Things I Wish I Knew. And these are topics on things, we wish we knew. Things that we wish we knew earlier in life. Sometimes it is too late, or we find out later. So today I want to talk about grief. I don't know about you, but I don't grieve well. And I've learned how to grieve better. As a pastor, I think I learned a lot more about grieving because I had to do funerals, just be with people as they experience loss in their life, right? So I just wanted to share a few thoughts with you guys about grieving well. How about you guys? Just comment in the chat. Do you grieve well? What have you learned about grieving? You can interact with me if you'd like. But, one of the things that we see throughout Scripture is that we should weep. We should mourn. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1, and 4 talks about that there is a time to weep and there's a time to laugh. There's a time to mourn, a time to dance, right? And so there is a specific time frame to mourn, right? A time frame to weep. It can be very unhealthy to weep for a very long time, to mourn a very long time. But I think we default towards more that we don't mourn enough, and we kind of cut it short really quick. So in the Jewish culture, in the first century, they actually took 7 days. They took 7 days to mourn the loss of a loved one. So you think about that, some of us would say, wow, that's way too long. Maybe 7 minutes would be better for us, right? But, many different cultures. I know in my culture, we do a couple of days of just mourning. We have prayer meetings. We gather together, have the wake, have the funeral, gather afterwards, gather before. And so it is a lengthy period of time of mourning loss, right? But you think about it, all of us have difficulty with loss in our life. And during this season, we've lost a lot of things. Some of you probably lost a loved one through COVID. Some of you lost a job. Some of you lost, I don't know, your place or whatever, you lost during this season. How did you mourn? How did you mourn your loss? some of us are going to lose in this presidential election, right? Whether Trump wins or Biden wins, we're going to feel that effect, right? We're going to feel like we've lost, right? And so there is a grieving process. We have to be able to learn how to grieve well. And I think, this is not no one taught us how to grieve well. No one taught us how to mourn well. We kind of learned that over time and through experience, right? And so sometimes we're just constantly sad or angry, or we even bargain. And why do we grieve? Think about what does it look like to grieve? Is there only one way to grieve? How about you guys? You could interact with me as well. If there's a way that you grieve, how do you do so? But one of the things in counseling that they share is that there's 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So 5 stages of grief. And I want to share with you a couple of ways, healthy ways to grieve well. And I believe that this can help you, because life is going to include losses, right? Whether you like it or not, you're going to lose something. And so I think the first thing that's helpful when it comes down to grieving is telling your story, right? I think one thing that we may look at that may not be something that we kind of don't gravitate towards is counseling or therapy, but it's so helpful. It's healthy to actually share your story, to share your grief, to share your loss with someone else, right? Someone who cares for you, someone who can handle your pain. And sometimes that's a trusted friend, a trusted spouse, a support group, or a counselor or some type of therapist, right? If you read the Psalms, you see David just sharing his story, sharing his story of loss, sharing his struggles, sharing his ups and downs, sharing his failures, right? All of those things, right? Like, who do you have in your life that you can share your losses, your grief, your pain? Who do you trust that you can share that with? And so one of the ways to experience healing in our life when we go through loss is to share it. I know in my life that has been amazing. It's been amazing to experience therapy and just healing just from talking about it, just sharing my story. And I don't know about you, but one of the things that has helped me also in just healing when I go through loss is journaling, right? I journal a lot. I use journaling in my devotions. When I do my devotions, I write out my experiences. I write out my failures. I write out my anger, and that's how sometimes I just talk to God. Yeah, Sharon. Yeah, I think the same way. I don't think I grieve long enough as well, right? And we kind of move forward very quickly, right? I think that's the majority of us, right? We kind of move forward very quickly and don't take the time to process it, right? So I think one of the ways that we can grieve well is by telling our story. Well, the second thing is we have how about identifying the statement behind the feeling? So whatever feelings you have, identifying those statements, and these statements may not be necessarily true, but the feelings can be extremely powerful, right? So, for instance, if a loved one dies of cancer, right, we might think, why did they abandon me, right? And we know they did not intentionally abandon us. It just feels that way, right? It just feels that way. So just identifying the statement behind the feelings. Think about something like in the case of an untrue statement, right? It's easier to release because we realize it is a feeling and not a truth, right? And not a truth. So statement, but think about statements that are true. They're harder to release. So it's easier to release statements that are untrue, but it's harder to release statements that are true. Here's an example. If you've had a miscarriage, right? You may think, I will never hold my baby in my arms. Well, that's true, right? And the feelings are powerful. These feelings are powerful, and that's a true statement. But just acknowledging that, right, puts value to our loss. Just acknowledging that, right, just making that statement, it brings value to our loss. We see the loss as something that matters, and it does, right? The loss matters to God, even if it doesn't matter to other people. It matters to God. An example from Scripture is when Jesus cried, right? I think that's probably the first memory verse I've learned from the Bible, right? John 11:35. Jesus wept, right? So even Jesus wept. And why did he weep? Well, his friend died. Lazarus was his friend, and he wept with Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters, right? And so there's a value in just coming alongside and naming or identifying the statements behind the feelings. All right, and so that's the second thing. All right, so the first thing is sharing your story, sharing that story with someone, right? Someone who's trusted, someone you trust, so that you can just allow it to come out, like just to release it. The second thing is that just naming that, right? Just naming the statement, identifying the statement behind the feelings. So some of those feelings may not be true, and those are easier to release, but some of those statements can be true, and that's harder to release, right? Here's a third way of just coping with loss, is releasing statements and feelings. This is probably one of the toughest part for most people, but it's essential, right? It's essential part of grieving, the grieving process, right? Maybe a person died, the dream that you had of, becoming somebody, some type of career. I know I dreamt of being an engineer, right? And I had to leave that whole career, right, and become a pastor, right? So that's part of loss, right? That's a loss for me. And sometimes, that job loss, whatever loss, you tend to bargain, right? Part of us wants to bargain that, so that we don't really have to face the reality of the loss, right? Don't have to face the reality of the loss. I think that's most of us. We don't really want to face the reality of losing what we lost. And so we protest, right? Sometimes we just want whatever, maybe the situation where you want justice. We want back what we lost, right? We want, we deserve it back. And some feel that they're deserving of punishment, and somehow the loss is their fault. The hurt is, a penance that we have, right? But if we can name why we can't release the feelings, we are pretty much on our way to releasing the feelings, right? If we can name, or let me say that again, if we can name why we can't release the feelings, we are pretty much on our way to releasing the feelings. So let's just say you had a miscarriage, if you lost a baby, right? And you know, you're thinking, man, I deserved to lose the baby. Well, if that was true, no one is worthy of having a baby, right? And an example of this is David, where, you know, David, you know, kills Uriah, right? Sleeps with Uriah's wife, Bathsheba, has a child. The child gets sick, right? And the baby dies, right? And, you know, David fasts and pray for the baby not to die, but the baby dies, and he breaks the fast. And so we have to, I guess, make a distinction between feeling miserable, right, for something that was a consequence, right? That there's a general understanding between punishing ourselves versus the consequences of sinful behaviors, right? The consequences of sinful behavior. You know, so David acknowledged that, you know, from his sinful behavior, there were consequences, right? And so he didn't go on beating himself up. You know, he moved on. And that was just his way of, you know, identifying that feeling, identifying and releasing the statement and feelings, which was part of the grieving process. So think about it. Some of the things, when we identify the statement and feelings, we can, you know, work on releasing them. Is sometimes receiving comfort helps us to release. Sometimes doing some sort of ceremony helps to release. For example, I know when there's a miscarriage, right? I know as a pastor, I've helped, you know, women deal with the loss of miscarriage. And so we do a ceremony. We actually do a ceremony. We name the child, the baby, right? Put a name to it, and actually go through a whole, almost like a funeral, right? And know and just identify that child, right? And just that just helps in the healing process. It helps in the healing process, to grieving that loss, right? Because we can move on very quickly from these losses, right? We kind of accept it as part of life. Yeah, and it is, right? It's part of, you know, life that we go through losses, but we have to learn how to grieve well. How do we release these feelings and, you know, the pain of loss? How do we release that? How do we heal from that? How do we do it in a healthy way? And sometimes understanding how important our loss is and the statement we have made helps us release it, right? So just identifying that feeling helps us release it. Sometimes it's just giving us permission to release, that helps us to release, right? Sometimes we don't give ourselves permission to release it, right? Because we want to beat ourselves up. We think, oh, we deserve it, you know, we shouldn't move on. And so part of that, part of what we're talking about here is healing, is grieving well, grieving in a healthy way. I'm sure you guys have a lot of wisdom, and, you know, how maybe you can, if you want to share how you grieve well, how has maybe a method that you've used, right, in your loss, has helped you, which will help somebody else, right? So if you want to share, you can share what are some ways that you dealt with loss, and how did you grieve well, and how did that help you heal? Is also important to know that is how we are designed. We're designed to actually manage our feelings, not to deny them and not to just stuff them, right? We're meant to it's managing and releasing. This is all meant to be like a river that flows through us, and not a dam to retain the painful feelings. So that's a good analogy, right? A river flows, and whatever it come across, it is just gonna take the waves are gonna take it, somewhere else. But if you build a dam, the dam retains the water, right? It keeps everything in. And I think, a lot, I know I do that at times, right? Where I just keep everything in. I just don't allow there to be a release of my feelings, a release of, the pain. Um, Here's another way to deal with loss and how to grieve well. Learning something from the loss, right? There's something that we can learn from loss, right? Every loss teaches us something about life, teaches us something about God. Um, and if we could find something that's redemptive about our loss, this will help with the wound. This will help with the pain that we're going through. We wish the wound had not happened, right? But since it has, we need to treat the wound. So think about a wound that you've had, in your body, on your body, right? If you cut yourself, depending on how deep it is, right? Whether you had to get stitches or you just put a band-aid, right? The depth of your wound depends on how much healing and what you're going to apply to bring healing. So some losses are greater than others, right? And that's going to take a little bit more time to grieve. It's going to take more care. It's going to just different methods and different ways in coping with that pain. Other pains are just easier to deal with, right? Other pains are not as deep. But so you have to identify, how deep is that wound? What does that look like to you, and treating it. So this point is, how, what are you learning from the loss, right? Perhaps we learn that we can receive comfort from God and others. I think that's one of the things that I've learned is there is power in the comfort of others, right? Just from people coming and spending time with you. I know from scripture, right? When Job lost, everything, he lost his children, he lost all his possessions, and here he is, he lost his health, right? And out of all of that loss, one of the things that his friends did is that they just sat with him and they didn't say a word for some time. And that's a beautiful thing. There's healing in just presence. Sometimes, I know I've been there. How many of you been there, done that, right? Just, I don't know what to say to somebody when they go through a loss, right? When they have lost a parent, they have lost a child, they've, gone through whatever losses, and here you are coming to them and you just don't know what to say. Maybe, you say, my condolences, I'm sorry for your loss, but then what else do you say, right? And it's hard to find words, right? But just being there with them, right, is healing for them, right? So Job's friends just sat with him in his pain, and it brought healing to him. So I think that's so important to understand that if we could just be with people in their pain, just seeing that we can be comforters just by being with them, just by being with them. And so we could also learn how to handle, right? That we learn we can handle more than we thought we could, right? Sometimes, we think about some of the losses that people have gone through, and we think, oh man, I can never handle that, right? I can never handle the loss that person went through. But then when it does hit home, right? When it does happen to our lives, we realize that we are stronger than we thought we were. And maybe God prepared you. I know times where God prepared me for loss, right? God made me stronger. God, just gave me the grace to handle some of the losses, um, because of the weight of it, right? There's a huge weight to some of the losses that we go through. What else can we learn? We might learn that ultimately there's nothing more important in this world than being close to God, right? I think sometimes the loss of material things, the loss of things that we've built and we dreamt of, and what we worked hard for, right? When we lose it, I think it puts life into perspective. It really shows us what really it matters, right? Like, what is the priority in life, right? Because we put so much time and money, whether it's a job, whether it's a friendship, whatever it is, right? I think from loss, what we can learn is that a lot of that is just temporary, right? Like, we um, put so much time and energy into things that really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, right? We're not going to take it when we die. I always say this: you're not taking a U-Haul with you to the grave, right? None of it goes with you. Everything stays here, right? The house, the cars, the inheritance, money, all of it, right? None of it goes with us. So it really puts things into perspective. And so ultimately, I think there's nothing more important than God, right? And so I think loss really teaches us that. We also learn how important the person we lost was to others. Maybe someone you lost, right? You didn't realize how valuable they were to others, but when you lost them, you see the value from that. You see that, and you learn from their life. You learn how much of an impact they've had in other people's lives, and sometimes we do that, right? We tend to take for granted those who are closest to us, and until they're gone, right? Until they're gone, we tend to take for granted, and we don't put value to them. And sometimes it is in that loss of a friend, loved one, we actually see the value they brought, not just to us, but to so many other people, and how valuable they were. We also learn how to love deeper, right? So we're talking about just healthy ways of grieving. We're learning how, in this point, we're learning what loss teaches us, right? What is the lessons, or what are some redemptive things that loss has taught us? And I think we learn how to love deeper. I don't know. I think we tend to throw love, right? That word love out so easily, and we don't really think through what it means and how deep that word is. And and I do it myself, right? But I think we learn how to love deeper when there is loss. I know when I went through my uncle passed away one year. The next year, my cousin. So that year, my uncle passed away of cancer. Next year, my cousin committed suicide. The next year, my grandmother passed away. So I saw I saw the value of relationships. I saw the value of love and how deep love is, right? And how much more I needed to value people and how much I needed to just love people deeper, right? It's tough because we only have so much time, we only have so much energy, and so we can't have the same relationship with our loved ones, with the thousands of friends we have on Facebook, right? I have over 2,000 friends on Facebook, and I know I can't treat everybody the same. I can't love everybody the same, and that's false expectations, right? Don't put those expectations on yourself, and don't receive those expectations from others, right? I just can't, and you can't do that yourself. You can't do that yourself, right? So, but to love those who are closest to you and love deeply, right? Give as much as you can to those who are closest to you. We also realize that there are so many hurting people out there that need to find comfort, and perhaps we can learn from them and they can learn from us, right? There's a scripture that says in 2 Corinthians 1:4, we learn to comfort others with the comfort we have received from God. And so I think probably one of the ways we can be better comforters is from learning from the losses that we went through, right? So maybe this year you've been through a lot of loss, right? You've lost many things in 2020. I know a lot of people lost a lot of things: people, work, opportunities, dreams. You know, they've had goals to accomplish things this year, and none of it came to pass, right? So, but in all of that, there was a sense of comfort that was given to you by God first, and then those that God placed in your life. Now, with that comfort that you received and are receiving, how can you comfort others, right? Because we learn how to comfort others from the comfort we receive ourselves, from what we receive ourselves. Here's the last point, and I'll end here. We have to accept that loss is a part of life. Loss is a part of life, right? And whoever we are, right? Whether we're a Christian, if we're not a Christian, whatever our skin tone is, our ethnicity, like loss is not prejudice, right? It doesn't, give exceptions. All of us experience loss. And so I'm thinking how we can learn from, and we could look to Jesus's life as one who encountered losses, right? He started his life starting out in a manger, or being born in a stable, and then there were children being killed in his town, right, where he was born. And then his family had to, leave because of that to Egypt. And then there's no mention of his dad, right? No mention of Joseph after he was 12. So it could have been that his dad, Joseph, passed away. And then when he started his ministry, he left his home, he left his family, he left his job as a carpenter, right, to go into ministry. He never owned a home. He never got married. His friends could not stay with him in his desperate hours, right? Before he goes to the cross and is crucified, everyone deserted him. Everyone deserted him. His family thought he was crazy. People rejected him, even though he performed miracles and loved in the greatest way, right? and showed compassion, they still deserted him. People couldn't understand him. And he was charged for crimes that he didn't do, right? And so he was innocent, but he was ordered to be killed on a cross, even though he was God. So think about it. Think about what Jesus went through, the losses that he went through. And then he says in John chapter 16, verse 33, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. How do we overcome the world? How do we deal with loss? I think we look to Jesus as the greatest example of one who experienced the greatest loss, but in all of that, there was redemption. There was a greater purpose. And even in this world, he says, we will have loss. We will go through stuff, but that we can be overcomers even through all that. Now, I went through a lot, right? And thank you guys for joining me in this. I wanted to share this as part of our bigger series of things I wish I knew. And we talk about, hey, things we wish we knew. And I think for me, what I wish I knew is how to grieve well. And I think as a pastor in this journey of being a pastor and, just coming alongside people who have losses in their life, who've lost jobs, lost their health, lost loved ones, I've learned how to comfort others, and I've also learned how to be comforted and how to grieve better than I did in the past. How about you guys? I hope this helped in just learning how to grieve well, how to release pain, how to grow and to learn from our losses. 2020 has been a very difficult year, I think, for all of us. All of us can say that. But in all of this, God is with us, and he gives us a comfort that nobody else can give us. There will be comfort from others, but ultimately God can give us the best comfort. And so thank you guys for joining me, and I hopefully, like I said, this helps. And if you want to review some of the content that you missed, if you joined us later, you can always go back to this post and learn it. And so I learned a lot just by sharing, so thank you for joining me, and love you guys. Have a great night. Bye-bye.